This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the founder of Kaiser Research, Mr. John Kaiser. John, it has been a while since we chatted publicly. How are you doing, sir?
Gerardo, it's great for you to have me on your show. I've been relaunching what I think we're going to emerge from this 12-year bear market that began in sort of late 2011, 2012. I think we're on the cusp of a major revival for market interest in the resource juniors. In fact, I call them the salvation warriors that are going to bail the global West out of their dependency of raw material supply from global East countries and global South countries who are increasingly throwing their lot in with the global East, especially as America withdraws its relationship with most of the countries in the world and pushes this America first against everybody else policy.
You know, you're one of the most insightful big picture thinkers I think that I've ever met. And so a part of why I'm so excited to have you on today is because since the last time you and I chatted publicly, the world has changed drastically. We have gold near 3,300. We have copper that recently touched record highs and looks poised to continue to do so. And a large reason for that is the geopolitical instability coupled with a bond market that seemingly doesn't want to cooperate with the current policy of this particular administration. How are you positioning for this cycle that you call potentially, a historic bull cycle here in the junior resource space?
Well, for the past 5, 6, 7 years, I have been focused on two narratives. One is the energy transition as the world adapts to a heating climate, a heating world, trying to limit the gain to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050, and coming up with all these new technologies like electric vehicles, wind power, solar, and all that, which require a demand for metals like copper. I mean, they predicted that just to have what we need for EVs to be in production or on the road by 2030, we need a 50% expansion of copper supply above and beyond what the macroeconomic needs of the world are. And of course, there's been lithium that's been a major. We've never ever seen anything like the demand growth thanks to a new technology. And the other talking point, which is even older, going back to the China super cycle, and I started to say, China is eventually going to catch up with the United States, and that may prove a problem. Now, the whole concept of globalization dismissed that because they said China would become just like us. But when Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, he said, no, we're going to be like we always were, and we're going to own the world. And that created my security of supply narrative. And we've since seen China throw its lot in with Russia, basically autocracy versus democracy. And I plot all the numbers that the USGS has published since 1930 about where metals all come from. And it's horrifying when you do a chart of showing what percent of each metal comes from the United States, the biggest economy in the world, and how much comes from combined Russia and China. This is a staggering vulnerability. And I see sort of the future for the juniors is Canada, United States, Europe, all these places that have shunned exploration and development in their backyards because they're so full of themselves. They need to start looking hard for metals in their backyard and develop it, because basically China and Russia, they have America and Europe and all the democracies by the balls, to be rude.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've written about it, I think, since at least 2016 publicly. You clearly are one of the first people that I started following way back in 2008, 2009. You were talking about this back then. So I take your point. I think it's valid. I think it's going to affect the way capital is allocated here for the next decade or so before we get some clarity there to see what governments are going to do and what they're not going to do, which is very different from what they say they're going to do, as we know. Let's talk specific names. There's no way I can have you on here without getting into a couple of ways that you're playing this. Clearly, you have a preference and a bias towards the West. Clearly, you want jurisdictions that are favorable and stable. Can you share a couple of names and companies that you like that are positioned well for this cycle?
Well, I've got this concept that I've launched in the past few years is that of the favorites collection, which are companies where all the missing pieces have finally fallen into place. And these companies come from what I call the bottom fish collection, of which I've currently got 110. These are stocks where good management, interesting stories. Some of them have money and their story isn't well enough known. Others are simply in the early stages of getting their act together. And there's 110 of these, and I've never seen such a fantastic collection of cheap stocks. And the favorites, each year I refresh it. There's 24 in it. Now, these are companies which is not so hard to explain to the public. What is the missing piece? Public doesn't want something complicated. This thing's going sideways, but you say it's going to go up 500% or more once the missing piece falls into place. So there's two companies that I have to illustrate it. And both of them started off the year in the bottom fish collection. One is Quartz Mountain Resources, and the other is Almadex Minerals. Now, Quartz Mountain, I promoted from the bottom fish to the favorites collection earlier this year. Almadex is still in the bottom fish collection, but I think it's on the threshold of finally escaping from that bottom fish status.
Let's start with Quartz Mountain. I know the company. I know the management team. I know a lot of the bigger shareholders. And I know drills are turning on what's a very, very exciting discovery there that had a phenomenal set of results last year. Can you touch on Quartz Mountain, please?
Okay, so for Quartz Mountain, I first put in the bottom fish collection for at the end of 2022 for 2023, repeated it for 2024, and that was when it was around 20 cents. And then it woke up when they went in there and drilled the Maestro project. Now, the story behind Maestro is interesting. This is an old but minor district where a moly deposit was outlined in the past, but there was also this gold-silver mineralization peripheral to it that has been poked at before. And when Bob Dickinson, who's the key person behind Quartz Mountain, looked at this, he said, they haven't really understood what's going on. So he was able in 2023 to acquire this project, solidify it so they own 100% consolidate. He finally got that moly deposit, which the lease lasted, and he was able to get hold of that. So he now owns 100% of this project. And last year, the stock jumped from 20 cents to 50 cents because they drilled a couple of scissor holes on the Prodigy zone. And one of the holes was not so great, but the other one was really great. But it wasn't the grades that were exciting. It was the fact that when they looked at this, they finally understood the direction of the structural controls of this system and said, all these other holes in the past, they've been vertical holes, and this thing is angled and it's in this, northeast direction. And so they would just get snippets of the mineralized structures. So I repeated it as a bottom fish because they'd spent much of their money and they didn't have a lot of money at the beginning of this year. And about February, March, they raised $4.2 million at 42 cents. And that was the key missing piece. Now they got the story, they have the permits, they started drilling in April. We should start getting assays in June. And what Bob has sort of packaged up, and you can look at the presentation and see they've done a wonderful job presenting the story. There's either a series of high-grade underground mineable gold, silver structures there that, could be who knows how many million ounces. But there's also the bulk tonnage scenario, and the analog is Blackwater. Blackwater was an old ratty system that in 2010-11, Richfield started to explore again, started to stitch together. That was acquired for a valuation of $644 million by New Gold, and it was distracted by its other projects, and then it sold several years ago to Artemis Gold, basically a shell company. They just put this project into production, and they have a $5 billion Canadian valuation. So this is what Bob Dickinson hopes to accomplish with this drill program. And so we have two outcomes. We have either we're going to delineate this high-grade underground mineable system, or we're going to see the beginnings of a bulk tonnage scenario come into view, and then we can start doing numbers with regard to the outcome visualization. What's the dimensions of this ore body? What's the grade going to be? We steal the numbers from Artemis Gold, what did it cost to put the Blackwater into production? And then we can start seeing the trajectory. So I've got something called implied IPV charts, which sort of show how the fair value channels for a project from grassroots to eventual production. And right now, Quartz Mountain, the Maestro project, has a valuation of $57 million, and it's still at the target testing stage because we really haven't got full confirmation that we have a discovery. Once we have discovery, we go into something called S-curve, which is also called the Lassonde curve, which is the market phenomenon that when something new and good is emerging, the market tends to overprice the story, often pricing it at a level that ends up what it's being worth at the end of the day. This is why this space with these discovery exploration juniors is so significant. And you can see in this IPV chart where the Blackwater project was priced at $664 million after it had produced the initial resource estimate, and now it's, after being put into production, it's worth almost $5.3 billion. So you could see Quartz Mountain go from its sort of 70, 80 cent level into sort of like a $3 to $5 valuation frenzy during this S-curve that erupts when a discovery starts to come into view.
Well, the upside is, I would say, imminent, for the simple fact that we're expecting assays, as you mentioned, here in June. They have a good hold on the structure. Clearly, that's something that took a bit for the company to get to. We're going to see exactly what could be there here in the next, I would say, 4 to 8 weeks. Accurate?
Yeah, I've heard they should start getting assays back from the lab. There's 8 holes. If they've done what they said they were going to do, they were going to drill 4 sets of 2 holes, basically angled in a northwest direction to trace about 500-meter segment of this inferred prodigy zone. And obviously the first one drilled will be the first one we get assays for. So we'll start seeing with the first couple assays, what are the kinds of grades? What's the distribution? Because the first hole, like the one of the 2 scissor holes last year, by itself, it had some good numbers in it, but you need to start seeing it in 3 dimensions. And this is what the market's waiting for. And the pricing that it has right now, it is, fair value for a $2 billion eventual outcome. And if it starts looking like the Blackwater system of Artemis, the market will connect the dots and start saying, wow, okay, and they'll really start paying attention. So right now it's in that quiet mode. The results could be terrible, very disappointing. The hypothesis, shot to pieces by the truth machine. And that's why the stock's kind of quiet and just hanging in here. But from a speculative point of view, all the pieces are in place. And all we need is a few drill holes in the right locations to show this story is coming together for a discovery delineation frenzy to kick in. And we haven't seen that sort of stuff on a wide scale in this market for a long time. And I see Quartz Mountain as perhaps being a kind of a symbol of the revival of the resource juniors, because you could see all this happening with slow motion. You had a chance to buy the stock. It's not like we're in a raging bull market where everything is overpriced and you're really just betting on which one is relatively underpriced compared to the others.
Well said. Excited for those assays. Have obviously eyes open and eyes on it. You mentioned another company earlier, Almadex Minerals. It's a company I'm very, very familiar with. I love that management team. They're technically astute. They have a track record of discoveries. They unfortunately were in a jurisdiction, that being Mexico, at a time where it didn't pay to be in that jurisdiction, made several discoveries. Were not able to monetize those, but now have pivoted that model to the southwestern United States, which obviously in 2025 should command a premium if discoveries are made as they've been in the past. Can you talk to me about Almadex Minerals and why this one is on your radar?
Okay, Almadex Minerals is sort of the second spin out from Almaden, which Dwayne Poliquin started, and now his son Morgan is pretty much in charge of it. And Almaden was the quintessential prospect generator farm out junior. And Rick Rule and all that crowd, they loved that story, and they did a fantastic job. They moved into Mexico, got lots of projects going during the 2000s. But in the 2010s, that's when they did something different. They broke the dogma. They started drilling some of their targets on with their own dime on a 100% basis. And the first one was Ixtaca, which turned into a major discovery. And then they spun out the first version of Almadex, and it discovered the El Cobre copper gold deposit. And then they spun out, they changed the name to Azucar and put all the royalties and all the rest of the assets into this new company, which is the current company, Almadex Minerals. Now, here's this junior. It's finally got these discoveries. It's on a roll, but Mexico turns into this AMLO administration, hostile to mining. A bunch of NGO type predators come in there and mess up the title. They end up basically losing title, and they're trying to sue both companies, Azucar and Almaden, are trying to sue to get at least compensation for the expropriation of their projects. Now, Almadex went into kind of a slump after that. They got lucky several years ago and were able to sell the elk royalty for $10 million US, which really cashed them up nicely. But what's the really interesting story about this is Morgan, during the 2000s, when he did his master's and then did his PhD, he published it in 2009. He did it by looking at eastern Mexico, which is where they made their El Cobre and Ixtaca discoveries, and sort of said, what makes these intermediate to high sulfidation epithermal systems related to porphyry systems tick in this area? So his thesis involved reconstructing the tectonic history, like all the way the parts of the Mexico were assembled, the subduction zones, the intrusion events and all that, and developed a whole way of figuring out where should these intrusions that spawn porphyry systems and the related epithermal systems be located. And we started applying that in 2007-9 to the United States, but they had so much success in Mexico that they got distracted by it. But since 2023, when they realized that Mexico is a no-go zone, unless something dramatically changes at the top of the government, that's not likely to happen under Claudia Sheinbaum, he's pivoted back to the United States and spent the last couple of years quietly doing this homework, using all this reconstruction, going into these weird areas where nobody has really pounded the rocks because there wasn't anything sticking out of the ground. And he calls it the lithocap theory and strategy. And what this means is all these systems have these big alteration hemlos, which are often barren. It's nothing there. It's all bleached. But you can assess the chemistry of the rock, and there's certain chemistries associated with these systems. So he's rolled up the sleeves, put the boots on the ground, checked out all these locations, and they've accumulated 14 of these prospects in Western United States. And so these could be like, ordinary porphyry gold systems, like, for example, what the Gab system is to the north of the Paradise Project, which is their flagship for the moment, or they could actually be fantastically rich deposits, maybe a Bingham Canyon that's hidden beneath the surface. Now, this is not undercover where there's like a basalt that's flowed all over it, such as the Hercules discovery in Idaho, where younger post-mineral rocks covered, or where everything's covered by thick overburden. This is more the deposits deeper. You got to go deeper, but you use this peripheral evidence to home in. And these are high risk, but also high reward projects. And they own 6 portable rigs, drill rigs that they can go in there. And the next generation of exploration is to drill scout holes to see if there's low-hanging fruit. And at a very minimum, whatever you get the geology, you get more geochemistry, and you start doing the vectoring. And this is what they did last year with the Paradise Project. They drilled a couple holes in there, and they got what they call the shoulder or edge of a porphyry system. And no cigar for that. The stock did nothing. But this year, now as they do more geophysics and that, they start stitching it all together. This is like the new type of exploration where you use a lot of digital technology to spin the data together and come up with targets that have high potential at a minimum to make where deposits actually located clear, but perhaps score it early on. And that's the story that's happening now. But the stocks was in the bottom fish collection because Morgan was paranoid, didn't want the public to really, or not the public, but other smart geologists to understand what he was doing. They haven't published the location of more than half of these projects. And the market says, well, yeah, whatever you're doing, we don't care. You're some semi-private company. Yeah, you're trading for cash breakup. Somebody will come along and steal the company, get control of it and steal the money. But that's starting to change. The stock's popped up above 30 cents. He's coming more open about the story. And so I think like this stock, if it gets to 50 cents, this is a no-brainer to become part of the favorites collection. And that's what I'm waiting for right now. My main thing costs $450 for the rest of this year, give access to everything in Kaiser Research. But I've also got Kaiser Watch Substack, where I publish the favorites collection, talk about that, and that's only $10 a month for. And I'm trying to introduce this whole idea of resource junior speculation to the Gen Z, to the millennials, and even some of the Generation X who really missed the boat, because this group has no idea how this sector works. And this sector, it's event-driven. You have to wait for events. Like right now with Quartz Mountain, we're waiting for the Maestro results. So we're kind of like, oh, this is boring. But getting your head around the story path, the stages, and the milestones, the timing and all that, it's a form of entertainment that allows you to sort of staring at your ticker screen, watching the ticker day by day or minute by minute movement. You place your bets, you understand the story, you see what the upside potential is, you know what it is you hope to see when the results come out, and you can add more when that starts happening, because the rest of the market will have no clue. So I think we're at the threshold of a big boom in the resource juniors with younger people coming into this sector, getting their heads around and understanding that there is a mathematical, quantitative aspect to it where they can intelligently bet where their fathers, their mothers, the boomer generation, they never really put their heads around the math. It was all just gut instinct and listening to the brokers. Well, there's no brokers left anymore. There's only commentators like you and I out there, and the information the companies put out that the investor has to, on his or her own, make use of.
Listen, John, you met me when I first came into this business. I had more than a couple of nickels, but it wasn't a ton of nickels. And the business has been very, very kind to me, largely in part because of how generous people have been, including yourself, with their knowledge, with their strategy, with how to evaluate risk and reward. It's absolutely literally paid off for myself, for family, for friends, and subscribers on my end. I absolutely recommend that everybody go check out John's material. Again, he's one of the most insightful big thinkers in our space. Once again, John, thank you for coming on. Can you please repeat where people can find your work?
You can go to kaiserresearch.com. That's my primary website, which is an information platform for do-it-yourselfers, covers all the companies listed in Canada and the United States. And from there, you can hop to the Kaiser Watch Substack and follow that for free. I usually have every week an article that's completely unrestricted. You'll get it in your inbox. And then when I write about, say, Quartz Mountain, the first time when I introduce a company from the bottom fish to the favorites collection, the entire thing is unrestricted. So if Almadex ends up in the favorites collection, you'll be able to see the entire background and story through the Kaiser Watch Substack. And then subsequent ones, when I comment on, for example, what do the Maestro results mean? Well, then you should have the $10 a month thing so that you can see more than just the first paragraph introducing the latest update.
It's going to be an exciting cycle. It's going to be a very profitable one. I hope everybody positions accordingly. Mr. Kaiser, thank you as always for your time. Appreciate it.
Gerardo, I really appreciate you walking me through this and doing this interview.
Looking forward to having you back on once we get some assays. Lots of drilling this year. It's one of the most exciting years in the space in quite some time, with companies capitalized and willing to drill within a macro backdrop of record high gold and copper prices. Thanks again, John.
Thank you, Gerardo.
Hey everybody, Gerardo Del Real here. If you're enjoying the content that you just saw, you can let us know in 3 simple steps. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share across your network and on social media. Take care, everybody.